Hello and welcome to the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we are moving on and covering values, fades, all sorts of things. Hopefully you checked out the first 4 episodes, QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. I thought we got a great baseline with some really smart people, but now we're going to go in, really highlight the guys that myself and our guests think you should be drafting this August, this July, whenever you might be drafting this year. And so without further ado, extremely excited to have on one of my own coworkers. Just got started with PFF very recently, like myself. Dude's been grinding, put on consistently great work through and through. Very sharp guy, Mr. Andrew Erickson. Andrew, what's going on, man?
Ian, what's up, man? The master of the gifts himself. It's finally great to talk to you in kind of like real life.
Yeah, man. First time we got him on one of these. I'm sure Andrew will be on a bunch throughout the season. And yeah, so again, to reiterate today, we'll be highlighting some of PFF's most recommended fades and values at each position based on our rankings versus ADP. You can find both Andrew and my own rankings on PFF.com. If you want to get it to by Monday, PFF code Fantasy40, everyone. So we'll go position by position with our top value, top fade, and then some quick honorable mentions. Andrew, who is your QB value?
All right, so we're going to start with a banger. Tyrod Taylor over with the Los Angeles Chargers. Basically, everyone has kind of forgotten about Tyrod Taylor, and I think when I look at the PFF rankings, I think I'm the only one that has him ranked at all. So I'm definitely flying solo here with Tyrod Taylor, but the way I look at it is he's got a lot of great weapons there in Los Angeles with Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, much more better upgrades than what he had with the Buffalo Bills. And the head coach, Anthony Lynn, that was Tyrod Taylor's offensive coordinator in Buffalo. It seems like no one's kind of really remembering that. And, during those 2 seasons with Anthony Lynn, you kind of calling the shots. Taylor was a really fantasy effective quarterback. He ranked 3rd in fantasy points per dropback in 2015 and 6th in 2016. I mean, and those averages would have been, right into the realm of guys like Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson for 6th highest in 2019. So I look at Tyrod Taylor and I'm like, guys, what are we missing here? He runs, he throws the ball deep. I get if they drafted Justin Herbert, but I mean, how long is it going to take Herbert to take the starting role? So looking at his opening schedule, Bengals, Chiefs, Panthers, all plus matchups for Tyrod Taylor. I mean, I'm taking Tyrod Taylor my last pick and I'm just like, I'll roll with it.
So keeping on with that schedule, I mean, the first time I looked at it, like you, first 3 weeks are fine, absolutely there. If you want to get Daniel Jones or one of these guys just with a brutal opening month stretch, you can definitely fall back on the artist formerly known as Ty God. After those first 3 games, we get at Buccaneers, at Saints. Originally, I was looking at that thinking, okay, that could be where we see Herbert come in, but then it's a short week before they go face the Jets. And if he can just survive those first 5 games, he gets Jets, Dolphins, Jaguars, and Raiders before the bye. All off-season long, it's like Anthony Lynn has gone out of his way to talk about Tyrod being more than the bridge quarterback, even before they drafted Herbert. As you said, they do have a history together in Buffalo. Man, I mean, quarterbacks aren't drafted in the top 10 to sit on the bench, but, I mean, it does seem like Tyrod Taylor, over-under, probably 8 starts this year?
Yeah, man. I like it. I like Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert. It's like, dude, how long is it going to take? I mean, I don't know, especially with this offseason that we got going on. He hasn't thrown any of these guys. And Tyrod Taylor was on the team all last year, so he knows everybody on the team.
Yeah, it's a good point about this offseason, too. In general, notch those rookies down a few spots and just across the board and particularly here. So I like that. Tyrod's cheap. You're going to see him going QB 30 in most of these things. Definitely could do much worse late round pick. I am also looking at a QB with a sub QB 20 ADP, and that's Mr. Cameron Newton. I've been quite vocal on the old Twitter sphere about my undying loyalty to Cam, but I think it's warranted, and it's not costing you anything to get this guy right now. And let's look at the situation. Edelman, N'Keal Harry, Sanu. Is that a great wide receiver group? Absolutely not. But is that maybe the second best one Cam's had in his career? I think so. I mean, the fact that he did as much as he did in Carolina, with all these quote-unquote weapons over the years that just couldn't do much, he's now finally in a situation with 2 coaches who have made their career, just taking advantage of their own talent and exploiting their opponent's weaknesses. So I thought, our own Seth Galina wrote up a really great piece when this initially went down. He pointed at that 2016 game when Brady was suspended, Jimmy G was hurt, young Jacoby Brissett under center, short week. What we see? We saw them play to his strengths, bunch of triple option looks, Edelman go in the backfield. bunches of goodness. They're going to set up Cam for success. All we've seen from the guy is QB1 production whenever he's been healthy enough to be on the field. It's unfortunate he hasn't been on the field recently, but come on, spare me the fourth-round pick Jarrett Stidham or 34-year-old Brian Hoyer is going to make this a quarterback competition. Cam Pass is physical, and unless you just want to assume the guy isn't going to get on the field, I don't know how we can't put this guy near the QB1 borderline. His ADP is QB23. I have him as my QB13 right now. Andrew, where are you at with Cam?
Dude, when he's healthy, he just smashes. I looked at his, we both had Cam Newton in our articles that we wrote up on the website, and basically I was looking at Newton and his finishes in seasons he's played 16 games, it's third, fourth, third, first, and second. So it's like, dude, if he just plays, he's going to smash. So just draft him.
Yeah, and it's like, is he really that much more injury prone than these just pocket statues like Matt Ryan, Jared Goff, Ben Roethlisberger? I mean, people say like Lamar Jackson's going to get injured because he runs so much. I mean, I've seen some good work from these medical people, and it makes sense. Like, these quarterbacks, when they're running, usually aren't getting teed off on like we see them in the pocket. I mean, there's just not that much more injury risk with some of these higher rushing quarterbacks like you think. So, yeah, man, Cam Newton, everyone. Again, these are outside the top 20 QBs. It's not the year you need to reach on the position. So, with that said, Andrew, who are you fading?
I'm fading Drew Brees, man. So we talked about, Tyrod Taylor and Cam Newton and how they offer upside as rushers. I mean, Drew Brees doesn't do that. And Drew Brees doesn't throw the ball down the field. So it's like, those are the two things that we're looking at when we were trying to evaluate the quarterback position. We want guys that are pushing the ball downfield if they don't run, or we want guys that can run if they don't push the ball downfield. Drew Brees doesn't do either of those. So I don't understand why he's being ranked as like a top 10 quarterback when I don't see the upside with him. Again, he has great weapons, but Michael Thomas doesn't push the ball downfield. Alvin Kamara's got touchdown regression coming. Brees is not going to hit his 7.1% touchdown percentage from last season, which was the highest of his career, when his average has been 5.4%. So to me, it just seems like I don't get why you would just not just draft Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan's just a better version of Drew Brees with better weapons and throws the ball downfield, and he's younger. So again, Brees, his last year, we see this cliff with quarterbacks, and I feel like this could happen. And who knows? They want to get Taysom Hill more involved. I'm not about that with Drew Brees.
I believe Brees has been the QB7 in fantasy points per game back-to-back seasons. This was after literally a decade, though, of this guy being top 5 year in and year out. And it's still costing you. I mean, it's not quite a top 5 pick these days, but he's being drafted about where we should expect him to finish. Like, we're not getting any sort of, being drafted at his floor and he's got this ceiling. Because as you mentioned, man, the ceiling just isn't quite there the same way in recent years without that rushing. And it's a shame because I think this might be like his best group of weapons he's had in his entire career. But the whole Taysom Hill thing, he's usually been a vulture for like other positions. He doesn't usually pull Brees off the field near the goal line that much, but they must have told him something to get him back here. I mean, for them to put him on a first-round tender, I just think we're going to see more than him than ever potentially this year.
Yeah, and especially if they're the ones that want him to use his arm, to go downfield, hit Jared Cook, down the seam. You're going to look up at a highlight and be like, oh my God, Jared Cook touchdown. And then you look like, oh no, it was Taysom Hill that threw it, not Drew Brees.
God, unbelievable. Only more annoying thing is watching Eagles games and trying to figure out if Dallas Goedert or Zach Ertz caught the ball, no doubt. All right, my QB fade, Mr. Baker Mayfield. I have him as my QB 24. His ADP comes in as a QB 15. A lot of similar things to what you just said. Like, one, there's just no rushing floor here. I mean, he's averaged 9.1 rushing yards per game in his career. For reference, I mean, Matt Ryan's at 8.8. I don't think anyone's out here calling Matt Ryan a dual threat talent. And look, Baker was just awful last season. There's no really other ways around it, and I think some people are trying to just chalk it up. Oh, Freddie Kitchens is a joke of a coach and all that. But come on. Freddie Kitchens was the big reason why Baker had that amazing second half of 2018 in the first place. Pressure was an issue, but man, over here at PFF, we track everything. Under pressure, kept clean, deep ball, this and that. And Baker was 33rd among 35 qualified signal callers in QB rating when he was kept clean. I mean, even when things were good last year, maybe he was just too spooked from having to run around the rest of the time. But either way, it wasn't pretty. And going into this year, okay, these great weapons are back. Most likely, I'm a little worried about this Jarvis Landry hip injury, but we'll find out More about that soon. But what about Kevin Stefanski coming in is leading us to believe there's going to be a breakout here, because we just saw him enable Kirk Cousins to career best marks in almost every efficiency category, and he finished as a QB 19 in fantasy points per game. I think we're looking at a run-first offense, and Baker's only chance to kind of explode is going to have to be through hyper efficiency, and I just don't know what we saw from last season to make us think that's on the horizon.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's really about looking at Kirk Cousins. He was really efficient with Kevin Stefanski, and I think that people might look at Kirk Cousins versus Baker Mayfield and think, okay, I think Baker Mayfield's probably the better quarterback, entering his third season. And I think that people are still holding on to his rookie season when he, really flashed, and, there are kind of a lot of, scapegoats in terms of, Odell Beckham Jr. was hurt last year, Njoku was hurt last year. And I do think that getting a tight end, little foreshadowing, like getting a tight end back that's useful, because Mayfield was really good his rookie year because he did have a tight end that he could rely on. Last year, there was really no one in that position. So where I think he'll be better than he was last year. I don't think for the price that you're paying for him is like, hey, I think that people are still like, he's not like at a discount yet. Yep. People are still remembering his rookie year and they're like, oh, it's still Baker Mayfield, still number 1 overall pick. So again, like I may not be as down on him as you are, but again, his ADP is still not like great for his, what he's kind of looking like.
If you're a non-rushing quarterback and you're in an offense that isn't going to be throwing the ball with a top, 5-10 level volume, it's going to be pretty tough to be a great fantasy quarterback. So, all right, now some quick honorable mentions. I'll go through my 2 and then I'll flip it over to Andrew. But so another QB I just really like compared to cost is Joe Burrow. He's my QB 12 ADP, QB 19. We've had 6 rookie QBs be QB1 since 2010. That's Russ Wilson, Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Cam Newton, RG3, and Andrew Luck. The similarities, all were week 1 starters, all averaged at least 25 rushing yards per game in college. Burrow gets both those. He averaged 27 rushing yards per game at LSU. I know he looks to pass first, but he's got a small rushing floor, going underrated. And then another guy I'm fading, Mr. Aaron Rodgers, my QB 16, ADP QB 12. Guy just had the worst fantasy season of his career low, 11.4 rushing yards per game. He still makes just some throws that, what's the Twitter craze? Only 2 people on the planet can make this throw. Rodgers has plenty of those. That's fine. He can still take over games. But at this point in his career, he's just a much better real life than fantasy asset, I think. So, all right, Andrew, who are your honorable mentions?
Yeah, so my honorable mention for a value is Jimmy Garoppolo. Again, we talked about he doesn't really have the rushing upside, but again, I like that he's really easy to stack with certain players. Like you can get him with a lot of his weapons, stacking with like a George Kittle. He's going really late, and he has a really good schedule in the opening of the season. So I like Jimmy Garoppolo from that aspect. And he also plays with Kyle Shanahan. So it's like, it's always a good combination. And, we've seen these leaps with quarterbacks in year 2 with Kyle Shanahan, a la Matt Ryan. So we could see in Garoppolo's second full season with Kyle Shanahan, we could see maybe him take another leap, especially if that 49ers defense regresses after last year, and they might have to play more aggressively, pushing the ball downfield. And then my fade is Daniel Jones, and you kind of referenced it a little bit, I think, earlier. Just his schedule, man. Like you look at his his opening schedule, and then like game after game after game, you're just like, I don't want to start this guy like ever. And the way that he plays is so volatile with turnovers and things like that. It's just like he might have a spike week here and there, but like it's going to be really hard to project.
I was much higher on Daniel Jones before the Clapper got signed on to be his new play caller. And I do like the Jimmy G call because last year, coming off that ACL, we've seen players in that second season definitely be closer to full health. And, only Lamar Jackson had more games with 4+ passing touchdowns last year. So we already saw, a mini ceiling. I know we all remember the 7 pass attempt NFC Championship, but wasn't all that doom and gloom for Jimmy G last year. All right, moving on to running backs. Andrew, who is your RB value right now?
Yeah, we've got Ronald Jones for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It seems like on most hated list for most people, but I like Ronald Jones. And I think that it's really the stink of his rookie season that just can't come off a lot of people, because all he did last year was just basically improve in every aspect. He accumulated over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. He scored 6 touchdowns. And this is when he was still splitting carries with Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber's gone. So I really think that Jones has kind of the green light to at least the early down back roll. And the thing with Jones is most people are looking at, oh, well, he's not going to be on, he's not going to catch passes. He can't pass block, yada, yada, yada. Keyshawn Vaughn is like the greatest thing ever. Dario Ogunbowale is going to be involved. But the way I look at it is like, I don't necessarily care if Ronald Jones is involved in the passing game. I'm getting this guy in the 7th round. He's playing on an offense that we're all projecting to score a lot of fantasy points. Like, he could be a la like a LeGarrette Blount guy, just kind of grumbling into the end zone. So, I mean, he was good near the goal line last year. He was forcing the most missed tackles for, players inside the 10-yard line last year. So he was better than Peyton Barber at it. And, I mean, I just think that his metrics, as a receiver, he was, 8th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 16th in elusive rating, like a lot of really great metrics for Ronald Jones last year. And I just think that people were just looking for an excuse to fade him, and that was Keyshawn Vaughn. So I think that ultimately, even if Ronald Jones isn't like the main pass catching back, I don't even know if Brady's going to target the backs that much because, I mean, why would you, like, he threw it to James White because, like, his other options weren't that great. But,
who
like,
else
now
throw to? Yeah.
But now he has Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and, like, those types of players. So he's going to throw it to those guys. Like, I don't really care that Ronald Jones may or may not catch passes because I think that he could flirt with double-digit rushing touchdowns. So in the 7th round, sign me up all day.
It's really just about the cost at this point. I mean, I don't think anyone would be down to buy Rojo as a top 20 back, but we don't have to. He's going right now. Best ball ADP is RB30, even lower. And if you go through some best ball drafts, people, I mean, after the 4th, 5th round, running back is a disaster. And that's when, people are loading up on their wide receivers. But if you want to go early and get some of these baller wide receivers in the first few rounds, I mean, I think the Tampa Bay and Miami backfield to a lesser extent are kind of the last shots you have of landing a true starter. So, Tom Brady called him Ron earlier in the offseason. I mean, that is relevant. That's a big deal. I am worried that we're still going to see a 3 RB backfield, with him, Dari, and Keyshawn, but you bring up a good point. I mean, even if it is a 3 RB backfield, Rojo, we should probably be considering Rojo the favorite.
Exactly. And I just think that he's going to have the best chance of getting those goal line touches. I don't see why you would just go in immediately and give it to a rookie. And we've seen before Bruce Arians. Look, maybe Bruce Arians isn't the greatest evaluator of talent for running backs because clearly he thought Peyton Barber was still good and he was giving him carries. He didn't play David Johnson. So, maybe if Rojo sucks, maybe that's better for him. So there you go.
Interesting conspiracy there. I like it. All right. My running back value is none other than Chase Edmonds. I have him as my RB41, ADP a full 10 spots lower at RB51. I think we have 4 to 5 true 3-down handcuffs in the league, and that is if the RB1 goes down, I think the RB2 steps in, assumes, a workhorse 3-down role. I think they're Chase Edmonds, Tony Pollard, Alexander Madison, Latavius Murray, and maybe Darrington Evans, the Titans' backup. They treated Deion freaking Lewis as a 3-down guy, so I'm assuming Darrington Evans could potentially get that as well. And just focusing on Edmonds, okay, he was good last year, 5.1 yards per carry, 150 total yards and 3 scores in his only full start against the Giants. Like, we saw good things. Whatever. The bigger sell is this offense. I mean, only the Ravens were more efficient on the ground. It's amazing what happens when you have, dual threat QB the caliber of Lamar or Kyler. And with this offense, we have one of the league's better running games. They only use one back, and that's the one consistency we saw all season. I mean, David Johnson, before he got hurt, was clearing 75% snap rates with ease. Edmonds, in his lone spot start that he didn't get injured in, 94% snaps. Kenyan Drake was regularly hitting that 75% mark. So, Kingsbury earlier this offseason said they're very happy to have 3 backs. If that's not coach speak, great. You got Chase Edmonds who has a chance to, climb up the pecking order. And if it is coach speak and they're handing the ball to Drake all the time, great, because now that's what Edmonds' role is going to be if Drake, who again we've never seen handle this massive workload, isn't able to do so. So I just think it's a point where maybe as an industry we're undervaluing these true 3-down handcuffs as a whole. And if you don't believe that this is a handcuff situation, like, even better, now he might have some standalone value.
Yeah, I think that Chase Edmonds makes a lot of sense there, especially, again, foreshadowing, one of my RB fades. I really like Chase Edmonds a lot. And again, he's going to cost you practically nothing to get later in your draft. So he's a smash play as a running back handcuff. Again, with a guy like Drake, who has been just a model of inconsistency throughout his career. He's been up and down, it seems like wherever he goes. And, as a friendly reminder, everybody, he played, with Miami without Adam Gase last year for a little bit. So he wasn't smashing over there. So maybe it's not all Adam Gase with Kenyan Drake. Maybe it's not.
All right, man, let's just get to your RB fade then. And why is it Mr. Kenyan Drake?
All right, so Kenyan Drake again. So he's going as the RB8, but I have him ranked as the RB12. So I'm still saying he's an RB1. I'm not saying, you just don't ever draft this guy. But again, you got to be decisive when you're at the top, looking at these running backs in the first couple rounds. And Kenyan Drake's someone that's not really someone that I'm selecting the draft button on. So basically since 2010, 45 teams have had a quarterback with at least 65 rushing attempts, and none of those teams have ever supported a top 10 fantasy wide receiver and a fantasy running back. So again, this is looking at guys like Hopkins and Drake, who are both going respectively at the top 10 at their positions. And Kyler Murray is going to hit that 65 rushing attempts threshold. I mean, he had 93 rushing attempts last year. So I expect him to rush more, but even if for some reason he rushes less, it's still going to probably eclipse that 65 mark. So again, this is just going to look at, like, when you have a rushing quarterback, that takes away fantasy points from the running backs and the wide receivers. Like, it's just less plays that those guys can make and contribute and create fantasy points. So that's one of the reasons, like, I'm looking at Drake as a guy he's potential bust factor in the first round. His touchdown rate, he scored 8 touchdowns last season with the Cardinals, which was the most of any Arizona Cardinal throughout the whole season. And he played just half the season with the team. So again, seeming a little unsustainable in terms of his touchdown rate, especially now that you factor in, okay, we just added in DeAndre Hopkins, red zone monster. Kyler Murray can call his name at the goal line. Like, all these other options, I don't know if Drake's going to be the guy scoring every single touchdown. And then the other thing that I've noticed, looking at mobile quarterbacks and their impact on running backs in the passing game, there's negative correlation. I've done a whole article over on it at PFF.com, and basically running backs or quarterbacks don't necessarily target the running backs in the passing game that often, and it kind of limits their upside a little bit. And Murray last season attempted the 4th lowest checkdowns to running backs. So I just don't know if the floor that he had last year as a receiver is going to be there, especially with the addition of Kenyan Drake. So for that reasons, like, I think Kenyan Drake's probably going to have to just be a really efficient runner, which is what he's done throughout his career. So I'm pretty confident that he's going to continue to be a great running back from a rushing standpoint. But as a receiver, as a guy that's going to get all the touchdowns, I'm still not so sure. So that's kind of why he's falling a little bit for me at the top tier of running backs.
Yeah, it's fair, and it is a muddled group after those top 5 backs. And, I was bringing up those snap rates, but in defense of your take, when Drake was getting those high snap rates, David Johnson was a shell of himself. I mean, we all saw the run against Tampa Bay where it looked like he had a piano on his back. Edmonds was battling a hamstring injury. He was still active, but when you're not getting any touches, it's, tough to think he was close to 100%. And yeah, the receiving usage, man, it's definitely, it's a good point, because even though David Johnson was getting a lot of targets to start the season, I mean, he was lining up in the slot or out wide, over 20% of his snaps. I mean, once Drake got there, it was more like 2 or 3 snaps per game in the slot or out wide at the most. I mean, he got the $8.5 million transition tag. That's not really the same thing as like an Austin Eckler, like 4-year extension. So I wouldn't call that the biggest front office backing. I guess, so I have Drake as my RB6, so I'm much higher on him than you. The reason I have him right there is because, yes, those are concerns, but to me, when you look after the big 5, you have Kenyan Drake, Derrick Henry, Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones. All those guys are great backs. I think all of them could be 3-down backs if you just want to give them the chance to. To me, Drake might have the best chance to be that 3-down back. We'll see if he is. But, I'm saying, like, he has that potential to be there. Will he or will he not be used in that manner, I guess is the main question.
Yeah, that's always kind of been the thing with Drake. He's always been flashed on low volume totals, and he finally got the volume last year, and it really paid off. It's just a matter of, okay, well, now what? He's entering like his 5th season. It's like we still don't really know what Kenyan Drake is. I don't know. I guess I still ask that question. It's like, do I want to invest or running, my RB1, my first round pick in a guy that I still like not sold on, like Kenyan Drake's NFL career at this point? Like, how do I summarize? I'm just like, yeah, he's okay. He's like been pretty good sometimes, but like I'm not so sure. So that's why I'm on the fade of Drake.
Yeah, it's probably why the new hit term in the fantasy circles is modified zero RB, where it's not, we're modifying. It's not zero RB if you're taking an RB, but we're calling it that. And that the idea of that is, you get one of those top 5, preferably top 3 bell cow backs, and then you take the dope wide receivers instead of the Drake Jones question mark tier. So definitely something to think about. The one running back that I am also going to advise no one to touch with the 10-foot pole, Leonard Fournette. I have him as my RB20. His ADP is RB15. I am slightly ahead of Todd Gurley and Le'Veon Bell because I think the touch ceiling is higher, but I want James Conner, Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Chris Carson, even David Montgomery before Fournette because, okay, he got a ton of targets last year. Like, that's what saved his fantasy value. RB7 on 341 touches, only scored 3 touchdowns. It's because he got more checkdowns in the league than anybody. But guess what? New offense. Mr. Jay Gruden is now calling the plays, and Jay Gruden's longtime BFF Chris Thompson is now the RB2 there. It was absurd how much he used Chris Thompson's start last season. Weeks 1 through 5, before Gruden got fired, only Austin Eckler and Christian McCaffrey had more targets than Chris freaking Thompson. So it's one of these situations where Fournette was a terrible receiver. He has a new play caller with a new running back, a pass catching back that he trusts. And like, what is the upside here? Because PFF offensive line rankings, this Jaguars have 26th ranked offensive line. It's an organization that seems to actively be trying to lose. I'm okay with Gardner Minshew as a late round guy because he brings some rushing upside and there's no cost, and maybe they'll be just down playing from behind a lot. But to me, this seems like great. We caught on to the volume in 2019, but I know it's a contract year. But like, what's that matter when it's a guy that just cannot pick up yardage efficiently in a new offense where we should probably be projecting his targets to be cut in half? I'm just, I'm lower on Fournette, and he's just almost always gone by the time I'm picking. Are you touching this guy this year?
I mean, if the Jaguars did any digging into like their offensive schemes last year and like how efficiency works, and they would see like Leonard Fournette touch the ball, they would be like, dude, we cannot give this guy more touches. Like, we need to like totally like do the opposite and like get somebody else the ball. Cause like his efficiency as a receiver was like atrocious. And even like Rock Armstead, like he was better as a receiver, just like from an efficiency standpoint. You obviously mentioned Chris Thompson. It's like a guy who profiles as a, pass catching back. That's what he's always been. And again, to mention it as well, Minshew is a mobile quarterback. So I seriously doubt that he's going to check the ball down as often as, like a Nick Foles. And I get that Minshew played the majority of last season, but when Foles was in there, Fournette had some of his best games as a receiver. So it did kind of actually help boost him up. And so I think a full season of Minshew, you're really going to feel more of that impact, especially with Minshew kind of being like, hey, I'm just going to like ball out, like whatever. He's going to rush more and just like show off that swag. So I'm off Leonard Fournette as well. Like I don't understand. Like he's just not good, man. Like it's not good.
I just think his style of play, it just lends itself to being benched so easily. I mean, these guys with the real low success rates and they pop off a big run. If the big run doesn't come for a little bit, then you're in trouble. And I mean, most Leonard Fournette moment ever was, Thursday Night Football, Jags Titans. 15 carries, 66 yards, long of 69 yards. So we'll see. Maybe he gets the volume again, but it just seems like a situation where, I get it, bet on volume, not talent, but I'm not convinced the talent's there to get enough volume again in 2020. So on the honorable mentions, I love James Conner this year. He's my RB14 ADP, RB21. I mean, look, we just talked about all these running backs that we have questions about from RB6 to RB like 12, 13. When you get in the next tier of guys, it's even bigger questions, and Conner sticks out as the only true 3-down workhorse of the group. I get the injury concern label, everyone, but you know what? If the worst thing you can say about a guy is he's injury prone, and that is like why he's as cheap as he is in fantasy, go get that ceiling. And the guy I'm lower on is Marlon Mack. I was shocked to see his ADP as the RB38. I have him as my RB53. Like, he's going ahead of all those awesome handcuffs that I mentioned before, your Pollard, Madison, Murray, Edmonds. And look, Mack's best case scenario is he keeps this as a 3-back committee with him, Hines, and Taylor the whole year. I mean, even an injury to one of those guys isn't going to give him this like 3-down role. They've tried to do that periodically the last 2 years. He gets hurt, and now they brought in Jonathan Williams to give the guy major reps last year. I mean, honestly, I like Marlon Mack. His jump cuts look great sometimes, but they didn't draft Taylor to not try to make him the workhorse eventually. We just need to get off of Mack moving forward, no matter how good he might have looked over the last 2 years in spots. Andrew, running back, honorable mentions.
Yeah, so just like to rewind it back. So James Conner, I agree. I think that he's a great value. It's just health with him, and it sucks because he really is in that injury prone category. It's just a matter if he can stay healthy or not. So we're just praying every day that Conner can come out all good to go. And I would say for your other running back, which was again who did you have?
Oh, we had Mr. Marlon Mack.
Oh yeah, Mr. Marlon Mack. I mean, dude, they drafted your replacement, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly the scenario. Like, if he was getting the job done behind the Colts O-line, like they wouldn't have drafted Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah.
Like he was good, but he wasn't good enough. So they drafted someone that's better than you. So I'm out on Marlon Mack. But in terms of values and fades, so my fade is Devin Singletary, which means my value is Zach Moss. I just can't see a scenario where Devin Singletary is kind of paying off his ADP, where he doesn't have, the goal line usage. Like, and it's not even like he's like second in command, he's like third. So he's behind Josh Allen and Zach Moss because they want to use Zach Moss in that Frank Gore role. So I don't envision Devin Singletary, having high touchdown upside. And you factor in, okay, well, maybe he can really work in more as a pass catcher. It's like, okay, again, the mobile quarterbacks, Josh Allen, doesn't check the ball down that often. No. You know it. Like he's chucking the ball downfield, man. He's going to Stephon Diggs. So again, not going to be involved in the passing game as often. So I get a running back in the 5th round that like runs between the 20s, like sick. Like that's just like not what I want from a running back. So I'll like take Zach Moss, because it's like if Singletary goes down or something like that, at least I know Zach Moss will get the goal line touches. I just think he has like arguably more upside than Singletary does, and at their ADPs, it just seems like it's easy for me. I don't see myself drafting Singletary anywhere right now.
Yeah, and I mean, as you said, Josh Allen never checking the ball down, and that was a big part of Singletary's value because he wasn't getting any of the red zone touches. And now Zach Moss, they want him to take that Frank Gore role. Look, I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be, just the world's greatest scholar with these rookie running backs coming in, but Zach Moss has been popping a little bit in some of these receiving metrics. Like if he's taking Frank Gore's role, that's already not helping Singletary, but he could even have like receiving upside from the small enough receiving plate. He can start to eat into that. So just the least fantasy-friendly situation you can pretty much imagine is that Buffalo backfield right now. Slightly better positional group, and I'm talking about the Bengals wide receivers now. Andrew, tell me who your wide receiver value is from this group.
Yeah, so we got Tyler Boyd coming in. So he's ADP wide receiver 31, and I have him ranked as wide receiver 19.
Oh.
I really like Boyd a lot in redraft. I know a lot of people are doing like best ball drafts and things like that. So Boyd's value isn't as high in best ball because, again, I don't know if he has those spike weeks. But from someone that you draft in a redraft league where you're putting in your lineup, I feel great about playing Tyler Boyd every single week. I think that, what he's shown us as a slot receiver, I mean, he's emerged as one of the better slot receivers in the league over the past 2 seasons. He leads the NFL in receiving yards from the slot since 2018. And now you got Joe Burrow coming in, who just peppered the slot with targets, Justin Jefferson on the Minnesota Vikings. So again, it just seems kind of like Burrow could develop quick chemistry with Tyler Boyd. And the thing that I want to talk about, about AJ Green, because AJ Green's finally signed his franchise tag on the last day, because he's thrilled to be a Bengal, of course. So the thing with him, and everyone refers to his 2018 stats when he was like the wide receiver 4. We've never seen Green not be a top end wide receiver, and that's true. But I looked more at what he did that season, and basically I was looking at his usage. He was insanely efficient from the slot. His yards per route run was 4.30, which is like an absurd number. Ranked number 1 among all receivers that saw at least 25 slot targets in 2018 before he got hurt. He had 67% of his fantasy points from the slot. Tyler Boyd ran the 5th most snaps from the slot last season under the new regime. 2018 was an old regime. They're not moving Green into the slot nearly as often with Tyler Boyd already entrenched there after last year. So that's what I'm telling everyone. Like, you want Boyd, you don't want Green. Green's not going to be playing in the slot, and that's when playing in the slot, like, you put players in there so they can win. It makes it easier for them. And that's why you see these veteran players sometimes move into the slot, because it helps get them, some more separation, gives them softer coverage to work off of. But I don't see that happening with Green. So for me, I think Tyler Boyd's easy, and I hope that his ADP keeps falling if people are going to continue to take Green, who at this point, like, dude, I've been down the Des Bryant trip. I've been down the Doug Baldwin one. Like, I'm staying away from these lower leg veteran, like these injuries with lower leg and these veteran receivers. I'm far away from those.
Yeah, the history of these older wide receivers missing a season and then coming back, it's just not good. Not good by any stretch of the imagination. And generally, I kind of think we overrate, guys working out a slot and not, like Chris Godwin, for example. He's going to be great wherever he lines up. But it certainly helps the fantasy projection when half of the NFL defenses are still just trotting out a linebacker to cover whatever slot receiver lines up. And we're going to see that again with Boyd. I mean, it is kind of a crowded wide receiver room with John Ross still there. Drafted T. Higgins high, my guy Auden Tate. I mean, we don't exactly know what the pecking order is going to be, but Boyd, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, he's starting to just get that, like, Jarvis Landry type, he's undervalued in every single draft. He's going to beat his ADP. It might not be the sexiest thing ever. I don't know that if A.J. Green, gets hurt that we would even change Boyd's projection all that much, but he's in the slot. It's his role. He's got anyone's idea of a QB upgrade, as you said, enabled for Justin Jefferson. There's definitely wide receiver 2 upside here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just locked and loaded. When I look at all these receivers, it's like sometimes you got to get someone that's has some semblance of stability. Like, you can't go into your draft with 12. You can't leave your draft with 7 Will Fullers. As much as I'd love to, as much as I could draft Will Fuller 7 times, it's not a recipe for success.
Yeah, it was a good point too about having different strategies, for best ball versus redraft. Definitely higher, go get that floor and redraft more so than best ball. Absolutely. All right, my wide receiver value, Mr. Terry McLaurin, my wide receiver 16 ADP, wide receiver 25. He was so good last year. There have only been 9 rookie wide receivers since 2010 to average more yards per target. Kenny Stills, A.J. Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, something named Anthony Armstrong, Julio Jones, OBJ, Keenan Allen, Terrence Williams, throwback, and Deebo Samuel. 2 busts in that list, but I think we saw enough from F1 last year to feel good about this guy moving forward. I mean, you just pull up his film, the dude's making Byron Jones, Darius Slayton, like top cornerbacks in the league. Looks silly for stretches. His route running, absolutely absurd. And like the worst thing we could say about McLaurin for months was that, okay, he can go off of Case Keenum, but what about Haskins? He solved those concerns in the last 3 weeks of the year when nobody was probably watching Washington at that point. Four catches, 57 yards, 1 touchdown. Next week, 5 catches, 130 yards, 1 touchdown. Finally, 7 catches, 86 yards, all with Dwayne Haskins under center. No Kelvin Harmon. I didn't even care if Kelvin Harmon was there or not before, but now we really have a chance to get something crazy like 150 plus targets. I understand putting guys like Juju, OBJ, DJ Moore ahead of McLaurin, but you look in these offenses, like even guys like Amari Cooper and Mike Evans, I just think there's such a difference in potential targets for McLaurin. I find myself going with the Washington wide receiver 1.
Yeah, it sucks because I feel like I'm not down on Terry McLaurin at all, but I'm just not as high as you are. And it's like annoying because I'm like looking at like my best ball shares. I'm like, man, I don't have any McLaurin. Like, why? Like, what am I doing? What am I doing wrong? And I think you too, like talking about the Haskins connection, I think that a lot of people may be like not as high on McLaurin because of Haskins and that they just think he's like total dust, which guys, I mean, he's a first round pick. Like give him a, like, he's like, hasn't played that many games. He literally played on our coaching staff that was like, hey, like, we don't care about you. Like, we don't want you to develop. Like, we don't care. And I think that Haskins is one of those like quarterbacks that is worth, I have him like in a dynasty league. And I think that I'm holding on because top 15 pick, like he can't be as bad as he was last year. And the fact that, in our PFF grading system, he was one of the better quarterbacks towards the end of the season in PFF grading for quarterbacks. So I think that Haskins can definitely take a step forward next season, with, kind of going in, being the guy and being with a coaching staff that's like, hey, like, we believe in you. And again, they brought in Kyle Allen, but I think that was like Ron Rivera's like move of like, hey, like, just in case like everything hits the floor, like, you can go with all reliable.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Haskins caught such a bad rap last year. He got thrown in like late in 2 games to start against the Giants and Vikings, both on the road. And then he starts off his career, oh great, you get to go into Buffalo and start there, have fun. And this was all in an offense that, Bill Callahan just wanted to give Adrian Peterson the ball 20 times a game and worry about the rest later. So absolutely got better as the season went on. I am a Buckeye homer, to be fair, but I do think that it is not time to give up on Dwayne Haskins yet, people. Absolutely not. All right, Andrew, who is your wide receiver fade?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with another. We just talked about a guy going into his second year, and this is another guy who's going into his second year, and it's Darius Slayton. And my ranking of him is pretty brutal, I'm going to be honest. So his ADP is wide receiver 39, and I have him down. I got to keep scrolling. Wide receiver 71, Darius Slayton. So I am just like, I'm out on Slayton basically everywhere. And it just, I'm looking at the way that things are set up for him, and basically he just put up numbers when everyone else was hurt. Like 4 guys were hurt, whether it was, Evan Ingram or Sterling Shepard or Golden Tate or Saquon Barkley. Basically, when guys were playing, he saw less than a 10% target share. When guys missed time, he saw greater than a 30% target share. Like the shifts in that are crazy to look at. And I'm looking for guys like that emerge because of like they're more talented. And I can't like confidently say like, oh, Slayton is like this uber talented guy. I mean, the guy was a 5th round pick. Like I'm looking for some draft capital here of like, why this guy, why should I believe in this player? And he's giving me a lot of like MVS vibes from last year where another 5th round pick guy and like he could be easily replaced. Like it's not like a 5th round pick is this like locked in draft capital. So that's one of the big things that I'm not high on Darius Slayton. I just think that, with these muddled receiver rooms, like for us to say that, oh, well, Slayton's like the clear number 1 guy, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'd rather just take a Sterling Shepard or a Golden Tate later. And I know that people will kind of say, well, Darius Slayton, he's the one that goes deep. It's like, okay, like that means his production is going to be like super volatile on a week-to-week basis. Not to mention his quarterback is super volatile and his schedule is absolutely brutal. And then you also have the fact that, okay, if he's going to be lining up on the outside, he's going to draw the primary coverage of the team's number one cornerback.
Yeah.
And as a 5th round pick, like, I'm not so sure he's going to be able to deliver on all of those things.
It's a new offense, too, feasibly, with Jason Garrett doing his thing. And, he is the field stretcher there, but, like, Golden Tate averaged more deep ball targets per game than Slayton last year. He wasn't a consistent part of the offense. He had a couple just huge weeks where he did flash, but, I mean, again, like you said, we never had a single game last year with each of Tate, Ingram, Shepard, Slayton, and Saquon all there with Daniel Jones. But, we did have a good sample size of those guys with Daniel Jones, and their targets in those games were Golden Tate at 8.4, Shepard at 8.3, Evan Ingram at 7.7, Gap, Darius Slayton 6.1, and then Saquon at 5.7. The dude was almost the number 5 option in his own offense. And look, I really do. I've found myself liking the Giants and Texans wide receivers a lot just because it is so unproven. Any of those guys could feasibly rise to the top, and they're all being priced as wide receiver 3s. But you said it, like, why is Slayton going 10, 15 picks ahead of Shepard or Tate? I don't get it.
Yeah, I'm staying far. Like, when I look at Slayton, it's just like boom bust, like written all over him, and it just like bust is like highlighted caps like all over the place. Yeah. So I'm so out on Darius Slayton.
All right, my wide receiver fade is Mr. Cooper Kupp. He is currently going wide receiver 13 ADP. I have him down at wide receiver 26, and this is why. I just think we saw way too many red flags from this Rams offense, both all of last season and particularly the second half, when they just stopped getting in their 11 personnel. I mean, this was the most 3 wide receiver heavy offense for the better part of 2017 and 2018, up until their week 9 or 10 bye week, whenever it was. But after that, I mean, it was just wildly inconsistent usage for Kupp. I mean, he played 28% of the offensive snaps in week 14, and he ended with these back-to-back 61% snap rates. I mean, it was like Russell Gage usage almost for a guy that I think a lot of us think is one of the league's better wide receivers, but I don't know. I mean, I had Matt Harmon on this podcast last week to talk wide receivers, and he brought up a good point with his reception perception, where, he's looking at guys versus certain coverages on certain routes, and Kupp has never finished above the 12th percentile in success rate versus man or press coverage. And if we're taking away his 3 wide receiver sets, we're taking away the field stretcher that has made the intermediate and underneath areas of the field so friendly for him, I'm just not convinced that Kupp is going to be this, just PPR machine that we've seen in years past. And the Rams offense, like, the biggest issue for them was their offensive line, because we know Jared Goff cannot create off script. We saw how bad things got for stretches last year, like against the 49ers, when a dude's getting like 75 passing yards on 25 attempts. What did they do to address the offensive line? Absolutely nothing. All they did was add Van Jefferson, a second-round wide receiver, who he is not this one-for-one field stretcher replacement over Cooks. If anything, we should be a little worried about Jefferson taking Kupp snaps for some reason. But, man, give me the clear-cut wide receiver ones, your DJ Charks, Devontae Parker, Stephon Diggs, Cortland Sutton, T.Y. Hilton, even A.J. Green, who you're not liking. I want all these guys over Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, the thing with Cooper Kupp is the system, the offensive scheme, it really seems like that McVay wants to run really helps out all the other players except Kupp. Like, the reason we saw Kupp flash really is because of Goff. Like, Kupp is definitely Goff's like go-to guy, whether it's in the red zone on 4th down, 3rd down. Like, Goff definitely likes going to Cooper Kupp in those situations, but it's the scheme that's like favors like Robert Woods. Like, it gets him like wide open all the time on drag routes. Like, it's the scheme that helped Tyler Higbee in the 2 tight end sets later on down the season. Like, so if McVay has his way, it's going to be like the Cooper Kupp fade show for sure. But if for some reason Goff is able to like kind of come in and be like, coach, like, I got this, then that would be the way that Cooper Kupp would kind of bounce back. But again, I like you have it. Robert Woods is higher for me.
Yeah, it's just like, both these guys are great wide receivers, no doubt about that. But it's like the Buccaneers offense. Like, I don't think they're going to produce 2 wide receiver ones again. So you got to kind of take a stance on which one it's going to be. And you just looking at last year. I mean, Robert Woods last year, 139 targets in 15 games. Kupp had 134 in 16 games. And then Kupp had 2 rush attempts. Woods had 17. I mean, it's enough of a volume difference on the ground for me just to give the nod to Woods. So, yes, anti-Cooper Kupp podcast right here, people. At least in Fantasyland. At least in Fantasyland. So, all right, hit me with your honorable mentions.
Yeah, so we got a wide receiver. My honorable mention is Big Mike Williams. I talked about Tyrod Taylor earlier on in the show, and I think that Mike Williams is going to be the guy that he can connect with on that deep ball. We saw in Buffalo, it was Tyrod Taylor with Sammy Watkins, another Clemson alumni. So you got Mike Williams from Clemson as well. So we're hoping that connection relives itself, resurfaces in Los Angeles. And I just think that, again, I looked at, another article with mobile quarterbacks and that they have farther ADOTs. They throw the ball more downfield because they can go off script. They can look downfield and just chuck it. And it's like, if Tyrod Taylor's going to hold the job, like, he's got to be more aggressive pushing the ball downfield. He can't be worried about, I can't turn the ball over. It's like, dude, like, this is probably your last chance at ever starting in the NFL if you don't, like, do something. So I think that Mike Williams is really being underrated. I think that everyone kind of looks at the Chargers like, they're never going to throw, like, so I don't want any of them. But Mike Williams you can get him in, like, the 10th round. He's not a guy that needs targets. We saw that last year. I mean, the guy had 1,000 yards on, like, under 50 receptions. So he doesn't need a lot of targets, and he can make big plays downfield. So Mike Williams is my value. And then my fade is going to be Julian Edelman. Man, I can't buy Julian Edelman, 34 years old. His PFF receiving grade has gone down each of the past, basically since 2015. It's gone down every single year. It's just, dude, like, I'll never say Edelman was like a product of Brady necessarily. But again, dude, like, they had amazing chemistry. Yeah. Like, Edelman would admit it himself and be like, yeah, dude, playing with Brady was awesome. Yeah. Like, and it's just not going to be the same. So a guy that, like, totally was a target hog monster with Brady, especially in the red zone, I just don't see that happening with brand new quarterback play. Even if he, leads the team in targets, I don't see it's going to be the gap. I can't see it being as wide as it once was with Tom Brady under center. So again, I saw Edelman go, like, in a draft in, like, the 7th round last week. I was like, dude, like, no, I can't take him there. So there's so many other receivers I'd rather have than Edelman.
Yeah, Mike Williams is just like a discount Darius Slayton. I like that call. And I truly believe, like, the dumbest conversation we've ever entertained on Twitter was that, like, Calvin Johnson versus Julian Edelman debate in 2017. I'm still mad about that. But, all right, I got Christian Kirk as my fade. I have him as my wide receiver 55. His ADP is coming in wide receiver 39. You talked about, like, how can they support Drake and Hopkins. I'm wondering how they're going to support Kirk throughout all this. It wouldn't be shocking if Fitz has more targets than Kirk next season. I know Kirk won that battle last year, but other than 3 touchdowns against Tampa's at that point in the season awful secondary, I'm not chasing this guy. I know that he's got a lot of his fans, but I just haven't seen enough talent from Kirk to think that he can make the most out of 100 targets. Give me those, give me the Texans or Giants wide receivers. Give me someone that at least has a chance to become their team's number 1 or number 2 pass game option. Kirk, he's going to need injuries to give us anything resembling wide receiver 2 production. And the guy I'm really high on, really high on, A.J. Brown, my wide receiver 9, ADP, wide receiver 17. Volume over talent, but there are exceptions to every rule, people. A.J. Brown just looks like the type of stud that I do not want to leave this guy off my fantasy squad. It's just like McLaurin. There's just too much talent here, I think, for him to bust. And, maybe we'll look back on this moment and say, it'll be a fun 85 targets for the guy. But I truly think, like, when you're that good, and especially like the Titans, I think we would, if we had to predict, AFC playoff teams to regress, Titans would be near the top of that list. More volume for a great player. Give me all the A.J. Brown. All right, moving on to tight ends, then we'll get out of here, everyone. Andrew, who is your tight end value of 2020?
All right, so we're going to go with Austin Hooper. So I got him ranked as tight end 8, and ADP is coming in at tight end 12. And originally, like, going in, after Austin Hooper signed with the Browns, I originally was like, oh, man, I'm going to be, like, totally off Hooper. Like, his ADP is going to be too high. And it really didn't trans out that way. It really kind of reversed. And it seems like Austin Hooper's kind of, like, hated a lot by a lot of people. And I guess I don't really see that from my perspective looking at the team. They are coming with Kevin Stefanski. He ran a lot of 2 tight end sets with the Minnesota Vikings. So again, they paid this guy. They made him the highest paid tight end in NFL, in the NFL. So it's like, why would they not, try to utilize him, especially when Baker Mayfield, like we talked about before, he was absent of a tight end. When he was good in 2018, he had that tight end. He had that player that he could lean on. And Njoku had a really good year in his second season. So it was like, why are we, kind of fading Austin Hooper? I know I get he's coming from a different offense, that was throwing the ball all over the field. But, who is the third receiver on the Browns? There's really nobody. And again, the argument will be, is it Kareem Hunt? So that's kind of where I'm kind of on the Austin Hooper over Kareem Hunt side. Kareem Hunt was already there. Kevin Stefanski, became the head coach, and one of the first moves that they make is, okay, they bring in Austin Hooper and they sign him to this lucrative contract. Like, he's clearly going to have a role in the team where, Kareem Hunt, like, he's the backup running back. Like, say what you want, but, like, last year, like, all those, he was kind of occupying the field similar to what a tight end would do. he was running those short to intermediate routes because the Browns had literally no one else to throw the ball to because all the tight ends were hurt. So that's one of the reasons why I like Hooper a lot. And you look at with Kevin Stefanski when he's bringing in play action, I think that's going to be huge because you look at Austin Hooper over the last 3 seasons since 2017, he has the most touchdowns off play action passes. And Mayfield threw the 3rd most touchdowns off play action in 2019. So again, you have these outside, you have Landry, you have Odell Beckham Jr., creating space for a guy like Austin Hooper, who I think that can deliver some of these big plays with some touchdowns. I think that he could become his favorite target in the red zone. And Baker Mayfield, when he's been targeted the tight end position, his PFF grade 5th highest, 87.8 since 2018. So again, he likes the tight end position. I just think that Hooper, especially his price is not expensive at all. I think that he's a guy you can play and not have to worry about, okay, maybe he's not going to break out. But again, I think that you can play him confidently and not risk getting a 0 in your lineup.
Yeah, I'm way more fine with Hooper at that tight end 1 borderline compared to the tight end 6 or 7 he was kind of starting the offseason at. And it's a good point about, will it be him or Kareem Hunt? Because, the Browns did nothing for that number 3 wide receiver spot. Stefanski in Minnesota was running 11 personnel at one of the league's lowest rates, if not the single lowest rate. I would feel better if they just traded Njoku because, we saw last year Kyle Rudolph 48 targets, Irv Smith 47. If you can then set down the one guy, that's going to be a hell of a fantasy-friendly target. But I still like Njoku, but, this is a situation where I think money talks. The recent history track record of high-priced tight ends that change teams is awful. But, I only went back to 2016 there, and this, we don't need to just assume because we have 8 bad examples of something that the 9th one's going to be that way as well. I just think he's going to need to get it through touchdown efficiency, which you said. He is the red zone guy, so I just think it's an offense, not going to be super pass heavy, but he has a chance to rack up those touchdowns.
Yeah, with David Njoku as well, we saw this last year. It was it was your guy, dude, Duke Johnson. It was hey, he wants to get traded, and then, we didn't hear from him for a while, and then eventually got traded. So it's I expect Njoku's probably going to get moved at some point. They drafted that guy in the 4th round. So it's they have a replacement tight end that they can use. And, I'm not even really kind of factoring in Njoku because I just feel like he's going to, sizzle out somehow, or whether he's on another team or something. So, yeah, I think Njoku's going to get traded. It's going to happen. The smoke, there's fire.
Free Duke for sure. All right, my tight end value is Mr. Chris Herndon. And before all you angry Herndon investors from last year turn off the podcast, let's remember how good this guy was in 2018, because here's our full list of rookie tight ends to average at least 8 yards per target since 2000. Mr. Herndon, Mark Andrews, Gronk, Hunter Henry, Heath Miller, Aaron Hernandez, Noah Fant, Jordan Reed, Zach Ertz, George Kittle. All right, so unless you want to say Herndon's just going to be the worst rookie, the worst performer after having a great rookie season ever, he's costing you. Again, I have him tight end 14, ADP, tight end 21. He's free. No one is even touching him in 1 tight end leagues. You'd have to go to tight end premium leagues before you're even competing with someone. Even then, it's probably going to be in the double-digit rounds because nothing has really changed other than our own fantasy investors' attitude towards the guy. From the Athletics' Connor Hughes, to say the Jets can't wait to get Chris Herndon back in their lineup is a vast understatement. It wasn't like this dude played last season and couldn't find the field. He was suspended. He tragically pulled his hamstring, allegedly running routes on air, and he couldn't get healthy. So it's until we see Herndon go out there and not do anything, I'm going to go back to buy the guy because he's twice as cheap as last year. And let me tell you what, his ceiling is as the number 1 pass game option in this offense. Crowder, Perryman, Mims, it's just the arguably least crowded offense of anyone, and he is free. I'm getting Chris Herndon in almost every draft I'm leaving with. I don't know about you.
Dude, when I wrote up Chris Herndon for my tight end breakouts pieces over at PFF, basically I kind of forgot. I was like, oh my God, I forgot how good this guy was. But I think it's definitely it's PTSD with some of these people because we recommended drafting. It's all right, you just got to get through the 4-week suspension. You'll be fine. But then, it just was a disaster. Yeah. It was an absolute disaster, a nightmare because, you couldn't play him. And then, he finally got to play and he played, 2 snaps, had, 1 catch, didn't do anything. So and basically, you just gotta kind of forget that. You gotta just throw out last year, especially, honestly, if you want to throw out last year for a lot of Jets players, I don't blame you because that year, just, there was so much stuff that just, is not something that you can necessarily expect to happen. The quarterback getting mono and everything that went down, a lot of those offensive metric numbers are look, you can't take that and try to just like copy and paste it to next year. So I like Herndon a lot too, as like one of these guys that, I'm targeting late in drafts, especially because he goes after guys like the Jonnu Smiths, the Mike Gesicki's. Like, he's after those guys. So even if you don't get like one of those late round tight ends who are, some of the more popular options, Herndon's still an option there as well. And I mean, and you look at who Darnold has targeted, like, he's had a lot of success targeting Chris Herndon. And that's the thing I think that's not being looked at enough, is just looking at the quarterback position. Like, Darnold loves Herndon. Like, he absolutely loves the guy. So I think that makes a lot of sense with a lot of question marks at receiver. Again, you have Jamison Crowder there, but we know Jamison Crowder has like a very limited ceiling. Like, he's not going to be a guy that's going to go out and be a double-digit touchdown guy. Like, we know his role as a slot receiver, but like, to be that primary option, like Chris Herndon, like looking at all these tight ends, like he could legit be like the number one option on his team, which there's not that many clear paths like that in the NFL, especially with Rashad Perryman and Denzel Mims really his like main competition. The only thing that I'm worried about is they did extend Ryan Griffin. So that's one thing that if they're like, hey, we gave this guy money, and then obviously like Adam Gase is there, so yeah. That's always like that's always got to be factored in. But it's clear that Herndon is definitely the most talented tight end on that roster. That's especially is starved of receiver talent.
Yeah, look, I'm not thrilled about Adam Gase calling the plays either, and it'd be great if Griffin, wasn't re-signed. But again, these would be bigger issues if he's going as the tight, borderline tight end one. He's free, so go get that upside, everyone. Seriously, and I think more and more just these tight end 4 through 10 range, I'm letting someone else take them. It sounds like that's your kind of strategy for your fade here.
Yeah, you can't draft these middle-end tight ends. Like, for me, I like George Kittle a lot. Just I think he could absolutely smash because he's got a lot of touchdown regression coming his way, potentially, especially with no Deebo Samuel for the first couple weeks of the season. But it's like, if I don't get George Kittle, like, I'm going to wait till, like, the 10th round to draft a tight end and just take a couple of these late dart throw guys and then just stick with the one that eventually emerges. I think that if I pick 3... I think that I can at least hit one that's going to be at least semi-decent for my fantasy team.
For sure.
Hopefully.
For sure. All right, sell me on fading Jared Cook.
All right, so obviously I talked about Drew Brees, so I got a lot of correlation. I got the best ball stacks on the mind, so everything's correlating. So again, Jared Cook is an interesting guy to look at because his efficiency has really been what kind of drove his fantasy production last year. It wasn't volume because Michael Thomas was getting all the volume in New Orleans. So Jared Cook was actually one of the guys that Brees would actually look for downfield. So we look at Brees' ADOT and how it's not great, ranking, near the bottom of the league. But Brees, when he actually targets the tight end position, has actually been at the highest rates in the league. His yards per attempt ranks second, and his average depth of target ranks first. So when targeting the tight end position. So looking at a guy like Jared Cook, I'm just not so sure that he's a guy that I'm going to have confidence that he's going to continue to be a down threat weapon for a quarterback whose arm is possibly deteriorating from arm strength. So
it's
I'm not
noodle.
Like
we can say that it's a noodle. It's okay.
I'm not confident that Cook can replicate the production he had. I mean, he caught 7 of his 9 touchdowns from Brees in the last half of the season, weeks 10 through 17. He has the most 20-yard-plus touchdown receptions for tight ends since 2018. He has 6. So it's like he's all been about the big plays, and with more competition coming back now, you're going to have a healthy Alvin Kamara. He's going to score a bunch of touchdowns. You're going to have Emmanuel Sanders coming in for the first time, giving the Saints a wide receiver 2, arguably for the first time in a long time. Yeah. So I don't know if Jared Cook is even going to be the number 2 option there anymore. He could fall to 4, and now you're waiting on just absurd efficiency from a tight end who's also older. So I'm not even so sure how much burst he really has left. So again, he's going as the tight end 11. So, and I have ranked as tight end 16. So again, I'm just like, I would rather take a stab on one of these upside guys, and I'm afraid that people fall into the trap of like, oh, like Jared Cook, like he's like established, he's like safe. It's like, I don't think he really is though in this offense. So I think that you need to like take a step back and be like, look, don't draft Jared Cook as like your confident like tight end, because last year we saw at the beginning of the season like he was terrible, like he couldn't do anything. So I'm off of Jared Cook at tight end 11.
And they felt the need to use a 3rd-round pick on Adam Troutman. I mean, arguably the most receiving-ready tight end out of Dayton. I'm with you, man. His best case scenario is the number 3 option in the offense. Give me Mike Gesicki over Jared Cook any day. Give me a legit guy that has a chance for that number 1 or number 2 pass game role. I am with you on fading Jared Cook. And the guy I'm fading is Hayden Hurst. He is my tight end 17 ADP, tight end 9. I was all in on Hurst when he initially got traded. he had like an ADP in the tight end 20 range, even going down into the teens, it was fine. But now we want to project a guy that has one career game with more than 3 catches as a top 10 tight end in the league. It's not like, I mean, we talk about the tight end position having athletic freaks everywhere. Hurst is like the one tight end that doesn't have some spark score in the 80th percentile. He's 27 already, and when he was at South Carolina playing dudes half his age, he wasn't even scoring 5 touchdowns a year. So, losing a battle to Mark Andrews isn't anything to be ashamed of, but I just don't know what we have other than Austin Hooper putting up some numbers in this offense to suggest that Hurst is going to be this shoo-in top 10 performer. I mean, that's the issue here. Could he do it? Okay, fine. I'm not saying he's not a talented receiver. I know I think he had that long touchdown last year where his game speed was legit. So, he's not the worst athlete by any stretch, but compared to Gesicki, Jonnu Smith, my guy Herndon later, I'm good, because as easily as Hurst could slide in as that number 3 option in the offense, I don't think we should be shocked at all if he finishes 5th on that offense behind Ridley, Julio, Gage, and Gurley. So for me, at this point, I am selling Hurst at this ridiculous price.
Yeah, he's definitely coming up in price, which I don't like. Like, it's hard to buy him because it really is all like you're paying for the potential. And a lot of times with the tight end position, that has not been a winning strategy. But the thing that I like to point out with Hurst, and I'm probably a little bit higher on Hurst than you, so I'm obviously, at the head of this hype train, or whatever you want to call it. But I look at the slot specifically, and Ridley and Julio Jones, are the primary outside receivers. They only move into the slot, when it's by design. They don't really play there a lot. So I was kind of on Russell Gage a little bit in the beginning. I was like, oh, this guy, he's kind of sneaky good. But then I looked more at his profile. I'm like, dude, this guy's classic slot receiver, special teams guy.
Yeah.
Kind of catches the ball and falls down. Not someone that I'm really. I really don't think that. I don't think Gage is really going to be the main slot guy. I think that it's actually going to be Hayden Hurst in the slot, because I think that. Also, the Falcons have this infatuation of we want to deploy an all first round pick offense, and Gage is over there being man, dude, I was in the 6th round, I don't know, and that's why I even think Laquan Treadwell actually could see some decent playing time because he was a first round pick, but that's a side note. Yeah. But I do think that guys, tight ends that move in the slot get an advantage, and you look at the top tight ends from last year, guys that Mark Andrews, Zach Ertz played a lot in the slot. Had a lot of receptions and targets in the slot. So I think that if he gets a chance to be the main slot receiver, I think that would probably be his best way to create targets and to give him upside. But again, it's risky. He definitely is a risky pick. He definitely has a potential to bust. But I think that if he hits, I think that you're going to be wow, I got a really good tight end. And again, you mentioned he was 27, but dude, that's prime tight end breakout age.
I guess so. Who cares if he's only been in the league for 3 years of that? But yeah, it's just more about we have to buy him at his ceiling now. If you got him, a month ago, kudos to you, but right now, not so much. All right, now on for my honorable mentions. I am fading Darren Waller at his current price. We're seeing him go ADP tight end 5. I got him as tight end 9. The dude's a great talent. If he gets triple-digit targets again, he can do big things with it. But why else would the Raiders devote 3 top 3-round picks and resources to get Jason Witten's corpse all the way over to Las Vegas? I mean, at this point in time, I'm just not confident that Waller is going to lead this team in targets. That's why I kind of like Henry Ruggs at his cost. But you just look at Gruden's history, and okay, he enabled Waller and Jared Cook in 2018, these great years. Before that, you go back to his Tampa Bay days, and stint 1 with the Raiders, we saw guys like Tim Brown, Joey Galloway, Keenan McCardell, just A-plus names all the way around, getting legit 130-plus target workloads. So I think the days of Gruden featuring the tight end are numbered. And my tight end buy is Mr. Blake Jarwin going off the board, ADP tight end 20. I have as my tight end 13. True seam stretcher. I mean, he's been so efficient with Dak over the years. Only Amari Cooper and Bryce Butler have averaged more adjusted yards per attempt among all Dak Prescott targets. Look, I mean, it's a crowded offense. I get that, and I don't normally like putting, we've talked all podcasts about not wanting to devote too many resources to guys that could be a number 4, number 5 option in the offense, but we're talking about a legit top 3 to 5 offense in the league, and, quietly the second most available targets out of anyone other than Atlanta. I am buying Blake Jarwin at cost. Andrew, who are your honorable mentions?
Yeah, going back to Darren Waller again. dude, Jason Witten, man, he's going to like pull people's hair out with what he's going to do. And even a guy like Foster Moreau. Foster Moreau was like vulturing touchdowns all over the place last year. So again, he's got a lot of competition, way more than he had last year. So yeah, Darren Waller is definitely not worth the price at tight end 5. And Blake Jarwin, man, dude, I've been Blake Jarwin truther since like 2018. Like I wanted him to break out so badly, and then they brought back Jason Witten, and it was miserable. So I think that he has the chance to. He probably won't be consistent from week to week, but like that dude is going to see like no coverage on him whatsoever. Like they have so many other weapons to deal with. Like he's going to have weeks where he scores like 3 touchdowns because no one's going to be covering him. Yeah. Probably against the Giants, because for some reason that's where he always blows up.
Always,
so,
yeah.
Always against the Giants. Start Blake Jarwin, DFS everywhere, lock him in. So my guys fades values, same team, fading Tyler Higbee, 100%, buying Gerald Everett, 100%. Like. Nice. Tyler Higbee, I was actually thinking about writing him up in one of the value articles for this week, and I just started out, looked up his ADP. I thought it was like around like 8 or 9 or something like that. It's like tight end 6 right now, so I just like was like, I started writing, and I was like, this is like utterly absurd, like his ADP, and it's like, you know what? I'm not even gonna write an article about this. I'm just gonna put it on Twitter because this is all I need to write. Like I don't need anything else to tell you. Like you can't draft him as tight end 6. Like. The sample size is way too small for you to have the confidence that he's a locked and loaded guy. And again, we saw last year how great he was. But again, this Rams offense is like, could be kind of different. Like, and Everett was hurt. And you just look at the splits when Everett was active in targets, it's not in Figgy's favor at all. So again, I think that the gap between the two is way too big. Higbee, he's definitely the front runner. Like I wouldn't say, just take Everett over Higbee, but the gap of confidence that these two guys are going at, the people are so sure that Higbee's the locked and loaded guy as tight end 6. It's just something I'm not going to take that risk. Like there's no way it's like a 90% of the time Higbee is the tight end 1 versus 10% of Everett. It's much closer than that for me. So for that reason, I'm out on Higbee. I'm just going to take Gerald Everett as another late round dart throw tight end.
Some situations like in Detroit, Galladay and Marvin Jones, you got the big difference, but we're so confident in Galladay just being a complete baller. We're fine targeting both. In this situation, again, it was so close between those guys for so long. Yeah, don't let 5 games just completely turn, your brain upside down on what to believe from the Rams. So I'm with you on those. And everyone, that is going to do it. We have covered QBs, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, values, fades, honorable mentions. Check out PFF.com. Andrew and I conveniently both came out with an article that we didn't even plan to time these up at the same time, but both going over some more of our thoughts in general. Andrew, what else you have up in store this week?
Yeah, I got tons of cool stuff coming out. We got some wide receiver rankings tiers coming out, some more tight end breakout pieces, and interesting piece on some potential veterans that could get traded, this year from every single team. So, hey, with some unknown with the college season, teams may be more reliant on trying to trade for some veteran players. So again, when guys get traded, opportunities open up. So I'm going to take a deep dive and looking ahead of some of these guys that, hey, some opportunities could come sooner rather than later.
Good stuff, man. Good job today, and keep on keeping on. That was Andrew Erickson, everyone. Find him and follow him on Twitter at Andrew Erickson, ERICKSON, with an underscore at the end of that. This has been the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Ian Hartitz. He is Andrew Erickson. Take care, everybody.